Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this episode of The Greatest Profession Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Asciutto. My guest today is Dr. Emily Singler, VMD. VMD, she's one of those very special VMDs, not like us lowly DVMs. Dr. Singler is, it's interesting. I was, scrolling through LinkedIn at 2 a.m. after feeding the baby, and I'm awake now. He's asleep. He's back down, which is nice, but I'm awake. So like, what else to do? And I don't want to scroll through Instagram or Facebook because that's a black hole. So let's choose LinkedIn. It's somehow more productive. You feel better about yourself because it's professional. Anyway, so I'm scrolling through. It's 2 a.m. And, I happened to see a post that Dr. Singler put up, and it was effectively along the lines of like, how do I handle being both a parent as well as a veterinarian? And there was, a bunch of other follow-up questions and thoughts within that post. And I'm like, yeah, this applies to me very directly at this point. So I reached out in a stupor and then went to bed. And then by the time I woke up, she's like, yeah, sure. I'll be on the podcast. Why not? Turns out she had just written a book that'll be released out in November. So it was kind of perfect timing from that standpoint. This again, Dr. Singler is the next in a long line of complete strangers who have put their faith in me to carry their story on this medium. And wow. I still can't believe anyone's doing that. Anyway, Dr. Singler is, the next in a long line of individuals who are strangers who are like, yeah, you know what? Sure. You seem nice. Or whatever their justification is for coming on. So this episode, we talk about a number of things. I mean, obviously, her journey, but a lot of my curiosity comes around this idea of parenthood within a professional setting. I mean, it's a really difficult thing to go from, hey, I've been planning to do this profession for my entire life. This is what I've been working towards, to, hey, now I got this whole other thing that's going to take up a good component of my free time, as in I don't have any. So it's a lot of attention. It's a lot of effort, and there's a big shift. And, you can't stay around until 7 p.m. writing records when daycare charges you $5 a minute and then kicks you out of the program if you're not there within 15 or something. It's a different world. So, we talk a lot about, things surrounding that within veterinary medicine. Dr. Singler does have a book coming out in November. At the end of November, it's called Pregnancy and Postpartum Considerations for the Veterinary Team. It's apparently available now. It's so wild. I mean, having, written a book that is still in manuscript form, that has a bunch of edits or some notes in the margins that I have to then go back. The idea of having like a release date and having it for sale for people, it's so wild and impressive. And, every book that I've ever read has had that. But like just being in this moment where she's like, yeah, and then it's going to come out and something's going to happen is so wild. So if that is of interest to you, you can hop on wherever you get your books, most likely Amazon. They're the problem now. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, that thing. Or you can, honestly, I guess if you just Googled her, or hey, better yet, looked in my show notes on my website, I'll have all that information for you. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Dr. Emily Singler. So then, okay, that's interesting. So you have a 17-year-old, a 13-year-old, and then you said a 4 and a 2-year-old.
A 4 and a 2-year-old.
So There's a gap.
Yes.
What happened in the gap?
I got divorced and was single, and then eventually got remarried. And my mom and dad divorced when I was 5-ish, and then she got remarried when I was around 15 and a half. So then there's a bigger gap, but it's like the next kid in line is 16 years different than I. So so this year, like at the end of this school year, I'm going to have a high school graduation, a middle school graduation, and a pre-K graduation. So next year, I was laughing when we were like doing school shopping. I'm like, we're going to be shopping for college and kindergarten.
Yeah.
Next year.
Gosh.
So
So,
I'm like, I don't know where I fit.
No, but I'm sure Walmart has it.
Yeah, Target.
Yeah, Walmart, Target, Amazon. Those are your places.
Yeah, I really have to think twice before like leaving the house anymore. I'm like, do I really want to go there? Like my son who's in pre-K, the preschool has them wear like a uniform for pre-K.
Okay.
I mean, it's like a polo and khaki shorts.
Sure.
We live in Florida, so everyone, wears shorts all year round. And so I was like trying to decide if I was going to go, to a store. And I made the mistake of saying something to him about it. And I was like, yeah, we might go to Target, on a Saturday to get your uniform. And he's like, oh, I really want to go. His big thing now is no matter where I'm going, I want to go with you. I want to go with you. But I always forget, like, as soon as we get wherever we're going, the entire time, like, relentlessly, he's like, buy me something, buy me something, buy me something. I want a toy, I want a toy, I want a toy, I want a toy. It's like, luckily he outed himself before we left. He's like, I want to go with you to Target so you can buy me a toy. Nice. And I was like, oh no, we're not doing this. I like just got out Amazon.
Yeah, but the next time he'll know that strategy didn't work. So he'll just be like, all right, let's see. Next time I would like to go with you so that I can see what you purchase for yourself. I want to buy mommy a gift. How about that?
You know what? He has tried that. He'll be like, mommy, I want to get you a toy.
Right. Yes.
I want to get this Paw Patrol toy. Nice try.
I remember using all these strategies as a kid, though. I mean, you take the thing and you put it in the cart and hope that nobody notices until checkout.
Yeah. But the 2-year-old does that. He just like grabs stuff and he actually will start like ripping things open to the point where it's like damaged. And I'm like, well, now I have to buy it because we destroyed it. But
that's the successful strategy right there.
The funny thing is that, the uniforms came and we were opening the Amazon box and I was like, look, here it is. And so I get out, it's like a red polo shirt and khaki shorts. And he's like, I don't understand. He's like, you said you were going to buy me a unicorn shirt. And I was like, what? He's like, the unicorn shirt, where is the unicorn shirt? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And then I realized a few days later, he doesn't know what a uniform is. And so he thought I said unicorn.
Right. Yeah.
Like I wanted a unicorn shirt.
Man, that's so wild. It's so like I'm at the like very, very front end of all of this where it's like you're looking at discover something in the world for the first time. And you're absolutely right. This is like, why would he know what a uniform is? And why would he know that that's different than unicorn? Just like you said it a little bit weird. That's it. I was going to say, so I kind of forgot this week. I'm recording a bunch of podcasts and episodes and I'm like, oh wait, which one was this one? So I looked online when I woke up this morning and I was like, oh, thank God it's you, because you're the one person who would definitely understand. Like last night, it was my baby duty. We like kind of trade off, and I'm in the room, and he's just so sniffly that he just like can't breathe.
That's the worst. That's the worst.
Yeah. So I'm like on this weird, hey, you kind of slept a little bit, type of thing.
So did you have to like get out the nasal aspirator and like?
Yeah,
suck all the stuff out and make them scream and
yes, he hates it. The one that I liked using when he was younger was that bulb syringe, like a puppy. But now we have this I guess it's a Frida, like the nose Frida. Like yeah, exactly. Which is I don't like that experience at all because someone's like pinning down
weird you out, like you're having to like suck it out or whatever.
It makes me like I just hate that we have to kind of hold him in like an insane person and just like jam this thing in his nose and be like, all right, start the pressure, and just so like one person is like aspirating, the other person's like trying to hold the kid. Like this can't be good. And then you're done with all of it, and then hey, lo and behold, he's exactly the same amount of symptomatic.
He just like made a whole bunch of new mucus, like
all exactly.
the time from all the struggling and crying.
Exactly.
Sometimes I like kind of think I'm like, wait, like I wouldn't do this with like my canine and feline patients. I would be like so much
Right.
more fear-free with them. I would like drug them.
Right. Yeah.
My kids would still just like hold them down.
Yeah, you are right. We get this extra benefit of being able to sedate to do all the things. Like if I,
Mhm.
yeah, if it's, something comes in and it has to get some blood work, but it is crazy and like trying to bite things, you can get a little bit of sedation.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I've known human nurses who are like, yeah, humans bite too.
Yeah, my humans bite.
Yeah. So that does make sense because I was wondering, like when I was just looking briefly through your LinkedIn, I'm like, oh, it seems like you have like older kids.
I do.
Because like why now was my question. Like you're doing all this stuff about like, maybe I'm jumping way too far ahead, but you're doing all this stuff
Yeah.
with like writing about, postpartum and pregnancy and, being a mom in the veterinary industry. But it's like, why now, not 17 years ago? Which is also maybe a valid question. So
That's a
what
good question.
inspired it
Like
now?
I've never really thought about it that way. Like I don't even think it occurred to me back then, you know?
Oh,
So I found out I was pregnant like 3 months out of vet school.
okay.
So I had just started my first job and I really, really wanted kids, but still felt totally unprepared when that was actually my journey.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and so I felt like there was a lot of my focus was on, okay, I need to make sure that everybody knows I'm still professional. At least while I was pregnant. It was like
Right.
all my focus was on like I'm not gonna let anybody down. I'm
Yeah.
never gonna miss work. I'm just gonna suffer
Right.
through. I'm not gonna complain. I'm just gonna do everything. Show that nobody has to like make any accommodations for me. Like I didn't
Yeah.
even like talk about being pregnant, even with the people who were around me. I just didn't. I was like, well, I'm a doctor. I'm here to work, and
Right. And
of
a
course, I
new
had no
grad.
idea what it was. And a new grad, so I was like still trying to like prove myself and figure
Yeah.
out what it was like to be a vet. And then I had her, and instantly felt I'm like that's it. I don't ever 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 want to be apart from her ever. Like,
Mm.
don't tell me I have to go back to work
Yeah.
because I don't want,
Wow.
because I was like, what do I do now? Like, we just moved away from my family. Like, I didn't have close friends. I had like no support network, like, no one to even go to with the feelings if I had like been able to put them into words. And so
Wow.
I don't think it occurred to me to like put it out there or like tell anybody. I was like, this is just my suffering now, where I like went into this career that I loved and I've always wanted to do ever since I was a child. But now, like, this new thing has happened to
Right.
me. How do I reconcile those two things? I don't know. It's a different world that we live in now where people are sharing in ways
Right.
that I think they weren't necessarily back then, or at least I didn't know that they were. And I also think it just took me having all the experiences that I've had and kind of growing. And I mean, everything kind of stemmed from me wanting to find more information from myself and not being able to find it, kind
Mm-hmm.
of more guidance. Like, how do I do this? Like, I would go to veterinary conferences and I would see, I would go to like dental lectures and they would show like a slide that was like a picture and it would be a technician or someone taking like dental x-rays for a dog and they would be wearing full PPE. And
Mm.
so I remember I went up to this, it was like a famous dental specialist. I went up to him afterwards and I said, is that what your techs do when you take dental x-rays? Does everyone wear like a lead gown and the thyroid shield and everything? He's like, oh no, we just did that for the picture. Because I'd
Uh,
always been trying to find out like what's safe, what's not. Like,
yeah.
do I really not need to not take x-rays? Can I do surgery? And like
Right.
nobody knew. Like I was the first person in my workplace to be a veterinarian and be pregnant. My healthcare providers didn't know. They didn't know really what I did on a daily basis. They didn't know what kinds of,
That's fair.
I saw a nurse practitioner. She didn't know what isoflurane was.
Right.
Um, they didn't
Right.
understand that we hold animals for x-rays because in the human
Yeah.
world, they don't do
Just
that.
put them down.
If a
Right.
child needs to
Exactly.
be held, the parents
Yeah.
restrain and the actual technicians are always behind like a lead barrier,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
So they just didn't understand. And so I would kind of Google things and try to get answers and just kind of make the best decision that I could. And then, I ended up being pregnant 5 times throughout my career in veterinary medicine, including a pregnancy that I lost to miscarriage.
Yeah.
And every time I would go look and be like, maybe the book exists now, like maybe someone has written it. And it was never there. And so eventually, just over years, this idea just formulated, and it's like, well, maybe I should write it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I was kind of brave enough to say it out loud to some other people, and I thought, I'm thinking about doing this, and I thought everyone would be like, well, that's weird. Okay. That doesn't exist because nobody needs it. Vets are smart. Everybody knows what to do. But that wasn't the case. That wasn't the reaction that I got. I said it to some people and they're like, oh my gosh, that's an amazing idea. Like, if it doesn't exist, you need to do it.
So like because you graduated vet school in 2005, is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
At that time, what was, I guess, the approximate demographic like of your class in terms of like men versus women?
Like 70-30.
Okay.
Women.
So gradually moving
like
in the direction of where it is now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like when I was going through, because I graduated 2017, because I went back into, it's like my second or fifth or whatever career. That it was like me and a couple of guys, maybe 10% of us was like,
yeah, no, there was still a fair amount of guys when I was there.
Okay.
But
because I'm wondering if that, because what you're describing of like nobody knowing really is, I'm sure, at least in part, a product of it being predominantly a male profession prior to this, right? Like in the 60s through the 90s or whatever.
Yeah. I'm sure that's a big part of it.
And it is interesting. I mean, what you're describing, and like I of course only see it secondhand through kind of Lindsay's eyes, but she works at a university, and it's like really, and this is not her first job out of school, and there's a lot of flexibility and all of that, but even still, it was like the amount of guilt that she had about going to OB appointments and, even now like pediatrician appointments. And, she's like, I just feel like I'm never there. And so she's like staying late. She's doing all this extra stuff because, she just wants to prove, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to put thoughts in her head, but it's just, or speak for her. But, in part, I'm sure that there is some amount of like, no, I can do this too. And I don't want to be a huge burden because I'm pregnant.
Yeah, I mean, I can just say for myself, I had that throughout all of my pregnancies. Like, I can remember saying that to my husband. I'm like, I have never missed work for pregnancy.
Right. Yeah, like a badge of pride.
Yes, yeah.
So where was all your family during all this? You said that you were separated from family.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Pennsylvania, from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I moved down to Orlando, Florida, kind of right after I graduated from vet school. So
why
I'm
Florida?
Still here. At the time, I started out in shelter medicine. Okay. And so there was a job opening at the SPCA here in Orlando. So that was one of the reasons. I went to a vet school at Penn. So we were in, West Philadelphia, which is not the safest neighborhood. And during my 4 years there, we were mugged at gunpoint once. Oh. And my husband at the time was carjacked at gunpoint. Wow. And they took our car. They took all the money out of all the money that we had in our bank account. And so we just had a lot of PTSD and we needed to leave.
I see. Okay.
We needed like a very, very different environment. And so I got flown down here for my interview for SPCA, and we're like, oh, there's so much sunshine. The people are nicer. And we're like, sign us up. Let's.
Okay. So
and
then
we kind of moved to Florida and never looked back. So.
Okay. That does make sense because because the other thought is it's very difficult to raise a kid without a support structure and family and stuff.
It's so hard.
Yeah. Like Lindsay and I are kind of isolated we are incredibly isolated here in Colorado because all of our families are elsewhere. And one of the thoughts, even still, like we don't really want to go back to all these other places, and we're, both a little bit older, right? So it's like, it's not, I don't know, going back to family, I guess maybe there's more barriers or whatever, but even still, we've thought about it. And we're like, man, it sure would be nice to be able to just be like, here, Gramps, take the
Yeah.
baby.
Well, like my sister lives like 10 minutes from my mom. And so my
Mm,
mom will be like, oh, well, I'm just going to, take care of the grandkids while your sister's at work, or I'm going to meet them at the bus stop or take them to camp. And I'm like, oh,
yeah.
I'm so jealous. But, we just had to find, our own community, and just kind of
Right.
make it and obviously do a lot of things ourselves and rely on paid help. When I was a single mom, I used to rely on friends a lot. I had a friend who would pick my kids up on like Wednesday evenings, and I never asked her to do this, but she would make them dinner and like make me eat
Oh,
when I got there too to pick them up. She'd be like, "Oh, the spaghetti's
that's
all ready,"
super nice.
and like I
That's
felt
awesome.
so guilty about it because I'm like, oh, like I should give her money, she's having to do
Mm-hmm.
all this work for me.
Right.
But of course, she was like so happy to do it, She was so
Yeah.
happy to help. And it was just, I had to just kind of accept that out of necessity. And I got um, like some of those microaggressions at work where I would have to leave early to get my kids because there was no one else. And
Right.
people would make comments about, wish I had a reason to leave early. Wish I had kids so that I could go
Ooh,
home. And
right. Yeah, like you're
I'm
gonna
like,
go
you
home
don't
and
understand.
lounge.
I've got like 15 minutes to get somewhere and pick up my kids before they like charge me extra money or like kick them out of the
Yeah.
program. Like I have to go.
Yes. Right. Yeah, exactly. And it's not like when you get back or get home, you're all gonna like sit on beanbag chairs and like, dish about the day. It's just
Oh
like
no,
dishes.
no, it's like another job. Yeah.
Something that you said about basically feeling guilty for someone helping you reminded me of
Yes.
something that somebody told me, which was don't rob somebody else of their joy. Like people
Yes.
want to help, that gives them a little sense of purpose and whatever. So trying not to, which is very difficult, but trying to accept somebody's help and like being okay with it and thankful and letting and just realizing that they're actually getting something out of it too, is
Right.
important but also very difficult to remember.
Yeah. I talk about
Yeah.
it in my book too. I talk a lot about like working, sometimes it's working mom guilt, but a lot of times it's just working parent guilt. I mean, I don't know what the experience is like as a dad. I mean, you can tell me. I know your son is very, very little still, but
Yeah.
just feeling this constant sense of I'm letting my kids down, I'm letting my employer down, I'm not doing all these
Right.
things I'm supposed to be doing. Like, what is wrong with me? Why can't I get it together? No, if I'm at work, it's like, oh, I should be with my kids. If I'm with my kids, it's like, oh, I'm not professional enough. I'm not responsible enough. Just this
Yeah.
sense that like I should be able to do everything. I should be, this kind of rugged individualism that like I
Yeah.
shouldn't need help.
Yeah.
I don't want to ask for it. And that's kind of like a point of pride. It's like, I don't ask for help. I don't take charity, kind of thing.
Right.
But when I was doing research for my book, I really looked into this whole idea of like, it takes a village to raise a child thing, because
Mm-hmm.
people say it, in all kinds of
For
like, oh, it
sure.
takes a village. What does that mean?
Yeah.
And I came across some studies that looked at, um, other non-Western cultures, and um, they they really have the whole community like raise the kids. Like sometimes they'll be like, okay,
Right.
you're gonna go live with this other family now, and they're gonna take you for a while.
Wow.
Um, and like
Wow.
they interviewed some of the moms, and they're like, why do you do this? And some of the responses were like, well, I can't do it all by myself. I just can't.
Yeah.
Like, why would
Yeah.
you think that I would? Like, of course I need help. And
Yeah.
and some of them were like, I can't remember it word for word, but it was like, because he would be annoying me a lot if he were just always with me. And it's like all the times where I feel so guilty of having that thought of like, I need a break. I need a break. I
Yeah.
need help. I need to relax. I need to not have someone take care of all the time. Like, oh, that makes me a bad mom. But it's like, no, everybody needs that.
Yes. Yeah.
Everybody needs that. And I go through this like every
Yeah.
day
And
because my little kids are just so crazy every single morning. And like to the point where I'm like, I cannot wait to drop you off at school. I just can't wait. I cannot wait for you to be somewhere else and for
Right.
my house to be quiet because I feel like I'm
Yeah.
under attack from like the moment I wake up. They're screaming, they're hitting, they're jealous of each other, they're pushing each other, they're throwing everything on the floor, like literally nonstop. That's what this morning
Yeah.
was. Some days that by the time I walk out the door, like parts of me are literally like shaking because it's so
Yeah.
stressful trying to just get out the door, and then instantly, like as soon as I drop them off, then I feel sad, you know.
Right.
I miss them,
Yeah.
and I think, how why did I want to be away from them? Like every day after I drop them off from school, I think someone needs to invent this. Like at least I need this, and I bet other parents need it too. I need like a debriefing session with like a therapist,
Oh, yeah.
and I need like soothing music and maybe like a massage, and I need to see video of my kids so that they can be like, look, they're happy, like they're doing
Right.
great, they're
Right.
good, we got them, you're doing a great job.
Yeah. So from like 7 to 9, their business
Yeah.
runs, right?
Yes.
And then again from like 2:30 to 3:30, like right before you have to pick them back up.
Yes, to help you kind of like prepare for the evening.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. Like there's times even now, right, where it's just like, man, it would just be so much easier to do all of these things. I just want to drop him off at daycare because he's in daycare right now.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like that, as soon as the thought enters the mind, then you feel like you start feeling guilty for having the thought. And
Right.
I'm in the phase now where like as soon as it's actually been great for my productivity. So like I drop him off or Lindsay will, or depending on the day, but either way, like he goes and I feel so
Mm-hmm.
guilty about not having him that I'm like, I got to get stuff done.
You gotta
If
like
I,
make that time be worth something,
yes,
you have something to show
yes.
for it.
Right. So then
Yeah.
it's like, look, this is what I did. And it's like this weird balance sheet of life where it's like that was deducted the time with him. It's like, okay, well, what am I
Yeah.
adding so that it ends up,
Right.
evening out at least. Yeah.
I think that's a very common feeling. Like, well, I better be productive at work. This better be
Right.
worth something so that then I can totally
Uh-huh.
not worry about anything else when I'm with my child again
Yeah.
and just be able
Yeah.
to
Which,
enjoy being with them
yes.
if that's
Yeah.
possible.
And right now I'm at least, I'm trying my hardest around 5 p.m. to be like, all right, I'm done. Or whenever, he comes.
Hmm.
Today is pediatrician appointment, so it'll be, 2:30 or whatever.
Earlier.
And
Yeah.
then I'll be done until he goes to bed. And then if he's in bed and I still have a bunch of lingering tasks, then I'm up late and I try to finish
Hmm.
that stuff up. And like there is the cycle. But there
Yeah.
is a point where we have to sort of realize, hey, you know what? Your life has changed. So maybe readjust expectations, maybe make way for this thing that, this obligation that you have. I mean, yes, it's a thing that you love and a wonderful part of your life, but there are many pieces of it that are just straight up obligations, something you have to do.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know. Lindsay's better about that than I am. And she's like, hey, so by the way, it's okay just to sit down and do nothing. Like,
I am
all
not very
right,
good
you're
at that.
right. Yeah.
I am not very good at that.
I'm glad she
That is
is.
that is something that I need to work on.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's really hard. It is really hard, but I do, like, I see your point, and I feel there is a point of diminishing returns when we're like constantly trying to be productive and figure
Hmm.
out that balance sheet, right? There's a point where we're no longer that productive, and it's nice to have that restorative time. And I always think of Linus Pauling. Okay, I always think of Linus Pauling because he won 2 Nobel Prizes, and both of the things that he worked on were created either one was like he was sitting on a beach and he was like figuring out alpha helices. He's like, yeah, I bet that works. And then the other one, he was like in a
What?
hospital bed. He couldn't do anything. And so like, oh, I guess I forget what the second one was for. And so I just like,
Okay.
if he can do it, I should be able to relax and also like something churning in the background. That's my justification.
Yeah. Well, they say like you have to be like bored and like not have like input all the time for you to be able to like be
Right.
creative
Yeah.
and think of new things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So
I
there you
agree.
go.
That is important.
Yeah, to anyone listening, here's your permission to go be bored. Go stare at a wall. Look at a tree sway in the wind.
I will say sometimes parenthood can just force you to the point where you're like, I just need to veg. I just need to
Mm,
let my brain like go wherever it goes and like just
right.
not have any. responsibility because
Mm,
the rest of the day, can be like overload from the teenagers, the toddlers,
yeah.
and, the dreaded what's for dinner question.
Right.
Even if I'm not like the one who's doing dinner, it's like,
Yeah.
what do you think we should do for dinner?
Right. I don't want to make another decision. That's what I think. I
Sometimes
think
I'm
you
like,
should
I'm gonna stop you right there. Don't even say it.
Yes.
And I'm
Yeah.
gonna ask you first, what do you think we should do for dinner? Because
Nice.
I'm not
Yeah.
deciding.
Right. Oh man. Oh, I mean, so you spent a lot of time in practice as well. So you like went down to Florida, you had this like
Hmm.
new baby all of a sudden, you're working for the SPCA or whatever. And then what? You ended up going to a different practice for like
Yeah.
associate
So
work, yeah?
I moved to a private practice when my daughter was like 5 months old,
Okay.
and I was in that practice for almost 15 years. So
Wow.
yeah, so she like grew, I used to like take her there and like put her in the office, and I would like put like a box in front of the door, like a baby gate. Like I can remember there would be times where
Great.
like I don't know, like I can't remember why. Like that was a thing back then. It was like it was really encouraged to not miss work. So sometimes when she was sick and she couldn't go
Yeah.
to like daycare, I would bring her to
Right.
work with me. And that was not productive.
Yeah.
but
Right.
but I did it, so many times because my boss just really wanted me there.
Yeah.
Um, but so um, I had all the rest of my kids while I was working at that practice just over the years. And I
Yeah.
even took, at one point, I took like a 1 year kind of maternity leave, like unpaid leave of absence,
Uh-huh.
just because of our family situation at that point. But yeah, I was there for a long time. And then
I mean, during
go
all that
ahead.
time, like man, how did you survive? I mean, so when I look at practice, I look at it in 5 year chunks because I feel like
Hmm.
I have no reason really to think that other than my own experience.
Yeah.
But I just feel like things kind of shift at like a 5 year mark. And then like those who have been out for 10 and 15, et cetera. Like how, especially when you're like raising a family and you're dealing with those stressors, and it sounds like it wasn't like a boss who was just like, hey, take all the time you need. Like how did you kind of get through like the day to days, and how did you keep doing it for 15 years?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think there were like enough things that happened like along the way that it did kind of feel like it was broken up into smaller increments. Like, well,
Mm,
this is my phase where I just have one child, and this is my phase where
right.
now I have two kids.
Hmm.
Um, and there were, I don't know, I just kind of did it. Like, there would be times where I'd think, like, is this what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? Like, is this what every day is going to look like from here on out?
Yeah.
But there wasn't something else that I knew that I wanted to do, so I just kind of kept doing it. I mean, there was so much other change in my life, with having kids and then getting
Uh,
divorced, and it was almost, I mean, it was good to have kind of my work
right.
be constant. Um,
Yes.
and so, I mean, I really did have a good boss that, nobody's perfect. And there were things I think that were just kind of like culturally common, like not missing work when you're sick and, like trying to
Right.
come in no matter what the inconvenience is. But, really good boss, also a parent, um, very supportive of me with all that I went through. And a lot of the times having no support, like no
Mm,
support. Um, you know, my clinic and the people who were there kind of on a long-term basis, like I really did feel very comfortable and supported by them. And so there wasn't really um, anything really driving me to leave. Um,
yeah.
just kind of got to the
Yeah.
point over time where I'm like, I just need to do something else. And there were changes in the culture and just things that made me want to find another environment
I
to be
see.
in after a
Yeah,
while.
they do say
So,
that. I mean, like these big entrepreneurs, for example, it's like, yes, they take all these crazy business risks, but then they have like a really stable home life or something. Like, not
right.
everything can be in flux at once
Right,
or you'll go
exactly.
crazy.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting. And especially, that support that you're talking about. I mean, if you have a community or can find a community and you are a part of that, that's a big thing. That is a hard thing to walk away from, for sure.
Yeah, so I
There's like
just
a
didn't walk away
hospital,
from it for a really long
right?
time.
Yeah,
I was actually
for a
really,
decade
really
and a
grateful
half.
to have it. So, um,
Yeah. So then it required that the business itself kind of changed a little bit. I assume it kind of changed ownership or something like that. I mean, in that time frame, I presume.
yeah, I went corporate.
Okay, yeah. So then enough
So,
changed sort of from that side to then allow for, okay, well,
yeah,
maybe
but
I'm
I
more
think it
stable in
also
my home
changed with
life.
me too, where I'm like, okay, now I feel, because there's a lot to be said for like safety and security and like things not changing. It's
Yeah,
like, well, I feel comfortable
right,
here. Like, how scary
right.
is it to go out and start over and do something new? And I just
Yeah,
also finally got to a point in my own life where I was like, okay, I think I can do this. And now my desire to do it and my comfort level with trying it is high enough that I can actually do it. So,
cool.
yeah, definitely not everything changing at once because
Right.
enough other change um,
Yeah,
in life.
yeah. And that wasn't that long ago. That was a couple of years ago. So you still
Yeah.
had a kid in high school at
Yep.
that time? Is that
Yeah, because that was COVID. Yeah, I had a kid like just starting high school, and
wow?
I had just had my fourth baby. He was probably like your son's age. It's like 3 or 4 months.
Wow. Yeah.
Well, no,
Yeah.
no, a little bit older, maybe like 6 or 7, because I had gone on maternity leave and I had come back from maternity leave and worked for several months, but he was still a
I
baby.
see.
I wanted to do relief because I wanted to just kind of completely own my schedule. I wanted to be in charge of
Right.
myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I didn't want all the insecurity, so I did it through indie vets because then I could have kind of like income security and not have to do all the work myself. So I wasn't prepared to like dive right into all of that. But the nice thing about it was that they also treated me like an employee. So like I was still pumping
Sure.
at that time, and so I was going into like new hospitals all the time and
Right.
needing to pump and not knowing what that was going to look like. So they would call all the hospitals ahead of time and be like, hey, she needs
Oh,
2 pumping breaks. She needs a private room.
nice.
And there were actually a couple of hospitals who were like, we can't accommodate that.
Right. Which feels
And
illegal.
which, yeah. And so, like at the time, I was like, what? And
Yeah.
they're like, don't worry, you're not going to go there.
Right.
We canceled your
Right.
shift. So it was really nice to have like someone have my back.
Yeah. I've been really lucky. Man, I have some hospitals that I just have long-term relationships with, and
Yeah.
when all of this happened, um, when by all of this I mean when we had our child, but
Right.
like basically I went back to work, a couple months later, because I took some time off as well, and I went back to work, and I'm like, oh, there's no way. Because I love to do the hey 7 to 10 days on the road and then I'm back,
Mm-hmm.
but I came back. I'm like, this is day one when I was gone, I was already having a rough time, missing him. But then a week later, I came back. I'm like, this is a
Mm-hmm.
different kid. He's just a
Different
different child.
baby. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
can I just ask you what
So
your experience was like scheduling your leave, your paternity leave, whatever you want to call it? I
yeah,
mean,
I'm. I mean,
how easy was that for you to do, and how clear of an idea did you have that you needed or wanted to do that?
so because I do relief as like my own thing, like
Right.
it was relatively easy. I would
You
say
just
that
make your own
it
schedule.
right. If not for the many years beforehand where I had to do the work of like being okay with saying no, which is its own, world, especially in relief.
Yes. Yes.
Um, yeah, if I didn't do all that beforehand, it probably would have been a lot harder. But because I'd already
Mm-hmm.
sort of built it in and I'm just like, no, I can't do it. It enabled me to be like, well, I'm taking these months off. And for me, it was really important. Like when I was a kid, the couple of things that I knew I always wanted was to be a good partner and a good father. And like for so long, so my previous partner, I didn't, she never wanted kids, and it just sort of became
Mm-hmm.
a thing where it's like, I guess we're just not going to have them. And then even, Lindsay, it's like, it wasn't like a, hey, let's, have kids. It's all we want to do and all of that. I think,
Mm-hmm.
I had sort of resigned myself to not having them. And then she was like, yeah, I mean, either way. So
Either way, to my life just completely changing in every way.
right, exactly. But like, I think that when everything was like, oh, hey, we're having a kid, then it became very, very clear. It's like, well, I'm going to be around and I'm going to shift all of this stuff that I'm doing so that I can be the most present and effective father as I possibly can be. So yeah,
That's
at the
amazing.
minimum, I mean, I was very lucky, and again, I'm older, right? I'm 38, so this is all wisdom that comes over the years,
Yeah.
and like learning who you are and what you want and your
Right.
values that
Yeah.
allows you to make those decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's great.
So
And
I knew I needed this couple months.
yeah, I catch myself a little bit because I know there's a tendency of like sometimes when a father does something, you'd be like, wow, that's amazing. Where like it's something that women are expected to do. But at
Right.
the
Sure.
same time, there's a lot of cultural bias against fathers taking any kind of substantial paternity leave, at least from my perspective, even
Right.
still.
Right.
Did you
Yes.
feel any of that or hear any of that?
Um, I don't. I didn't. But also I'm as an itinerant, as someone who's like there temporarily. I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
I would get that feedback. I would say that like I'm also one of these people who I don't know. I've never been like a prototypical male. Like no one would ever assume that I would like leave and be like, well, I'm bringing home money or, whatever, like whatever that like traditional
That's my
1950s
role.
role, like put your
Right.
suspenders on. Yeah.
Yeah.
I came back with a piece of meat wrapped in newspaper. Like be happy with it. Like no,
Yeah.
no one's going to assume that that's me. I've always sort
Yeah.
of been the guy. Like most of my friends are women. I was a kid who was mostly raised by a single mom, so I think that probably because of all of those things together, it's like expected of me to be
Yeah.
that version of father.
Yeah. My husband is a physical therapist and he works for a big hospital system. And you generally think about like big
Mm,
employers having like good benefits. And
right.
now that we're like done having kids, he's like, yeah, they're doing paternity leave.
Right, exactly. And she had, oh, I forget what it was now. Again, baby brain, but it was like 12 weeks or whatever like the
Hmm.
federal minimum is like
Yeah.
that's what she was able to take. And so the rest of it, and you had to like use your PTO plus your sick days that you'd already accumulated, and then you can like take the rest of the time either unpaid or maybe like the short-term disability if you had enough. It was like a whole thing that we didn't know
Yeah.
anything about.
Yeah.
And like we talked to HR and I don't know. So yeah, that's its own it's a
Yeah.
crazy
And
thing.
then and then you go back to work and you put your child in daycare,
Yeah.
maybe, or, at least this was my experience, and they get RSV the very first week that they're there. And then you have to stay home with them for a
Right.
week after that.
Yes.
And you
Yeah.
have no vacation time because you've
Yes.
just used it all. And everyone is so put out because you've just come back and they've been struggling without you all this time. And then,
Yeah.
like, for me, that was like the guilt would just start right away. They'd be like, okay, well, if you can't come in, I guess we understand. Um, but like at the same time, it's like,
Yeah.
I know that this is like really bad and everyone's got to be really upset with me and I feel like I'm supposed to be at work, but like my baby is struggling and what am I supposed to do? And no
Right.
matter what I do, I'm miserable. Like
Right.
that's how a lot of it
And
was, at least for
I think
me.
it's difficult too because it's like they're not wrong, right? Like you, by not being there, there is an inconvenience and an additional burden that's placed on everyone else
Yeah.
around
Oh
you.
yeah. No, it's true. It's not made up. It's
Right.
definitely true.
So it's not like these are
and
unreasonable
and you're
people who have unreasonable
acutely aware of that.
expectations.
Oh no, and I'm not trying
Exactly.
to suggest that. It's just
No, 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 of course. But it's like, that's how you
yeah.
feel. And then you're just like, no, it must be them. It's like, no, like they're being reasonable also. It's like, we're all right
No.
here.
I was very aware that it was like a huge, you know, revenue loss slash inconvenience for
Mm-hmm.
everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So in my mind, it was all on me. Like no matter
Right.
what decision
Right.
was made, it was on me to not let anybody down, which is just impossible.
Right.
It's just
Yes.
impossible.
Yeah.
So
Which,
I think
I
that's
mean,
something
again, I
we all
guess,
need to keep in mind.
right. And maybe it's shifting the expectation again, because we're kind of going off of this baseline that we're there all the time, we're able to produce all the time, that there is no
Hmm.
time away. And so that any time away is a deviation from that. Whereas the baseline
Right.
probably should be something lower, right? Like I'm expected to work, you know, 10 of these 12 months. How that is distributed is just kind of variable or whatever.
That would be lovely. I like that idea.
Yeah.
Let's
I think that
institute
we as
that.
okay, let's do it. Let's do it right now. I think that this is also probably a veterinary. I mean, veterinarians are probably going to be more prone to this mindset, um, because, like, I think a lot about even in diagnosis, right, or when you're treating an animal. The baseline for me is that the animal gets better. Like, if it's not, then I didn't do my job, right? But that
Hmm.
can't be true. Like there has to be this. I have to have the leeway of saying, like, hey, sometimes physiology is against you, the disease process is against you, and you can't do
Right.
it, and
Right.
you shouldn't feel like a failure. And these feel like that they're attached ideas, that they're somehow related.
Oh, yeah, they totally are because we're very much set up to never fail, and
Right.
it's just
Yeah.
not sustainable. It's not possible.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm. I mean, have you gained any wisdoms in that way? I mean, in all your years as both a parent and a veterinarian?
I mean, I think that the best way that I can word it is just you have to somehow get comfortable with the idea that you're going to let people down.
Hmm.
You just
Mm-hmm.
have to be okay with it. You just can't let it destroy you because I think that's what I let it do for a long time is
Right.
just completely destroy me and, you know, lead to this self blame, self loathing kind of, whether
Yeah.
it's my boss, whether it's my client, whether it's my spouse or my children, just this constant feeling of I have to meet everybody's expectations all of the time. Just say that I can't do it. I can't do it.
Yeah.
And kind of, I hate to use the word forgive, but almost kind of, I needed to forgive myself, even though that really wasn't necessary. I needed to kind of give myself permission to
Hmm.
just say no some of the time and just say that's not going to be possible. This is what I need, or this is what I'm capable of doing. So it's not easy. It's something I still struggle with. um,
Right, right. And I guess I just wonder, like, how to actually do that. And I don't know if I have great insight into that either. I know that on the like on the back end, like where you are now, where you have that realization, and you're like, well, I'm just going to let some people down sometimes, and that's life. Um, but that's a very different place than the very beginning of you having that realization and trying to change your behavior accordingly. I'm just wondering, like, for those who are struggling, like,
mhm.
how do you get started sort of forgiving yourself and understanding that this is just a part of it, is letting people down sometimes?
Um, I mean, some of it is just kind of going through it and receiving kind of grace and understanding from other people,
Mm,
and seeing like, okay, they, whatever you catastrophize and say like, oh, well, this happens, I'm going to lose my job, or so and so is going to be so mad at me, or my client's going to go somewhere else, and
right,
just like kind of living through that experiment and seeing like, oh, that didn't happen. Like, oh, they
right,
understood. Like, oh, no one really expected that of me.
right.
I survived and life went on. So sometimes it's just kind of living it and also just having it maybe pointed out to you. I mean, in my um, life, I've had a lot of therapy.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that has been really helpful to find, kind of an insightful person who's not kind of all wrapped up in um, the emotions of your life, to just be like, hey, is this a reasonable expectation that you have of yourself?
Right.
I don't think that
Yeah.
it is, in the kindest and gentlest way.
Right. Yeah, they can interrupt a cycle of thoughts before
Hmm.
you continue down a path that honestly, that anyone, I mean, even if you're like, well, I can't afford therapy or can't, go
Right.
to whatever. I mean,
Right.
or
Yeah. It
I
doesn't.
don't believe in it, whatever. I mean, like truly just another human being that you trust and that is in your, that you value their insight.
Sure. Yeah. Anyone could be that person in your life if
Right.
if
Right.
they're kind of insightful enough to recognize that. And sometimes you just see the
Right.
experiences that other people have. I mean, that's one of the great things I think about, social media. Is they're not all great things, but people are being more open, with their journeys, with their experiences. And I've learned a
Yeah.
lot from things that other people have shared, and learned, from hearing other people say, like, this is how I felt, but this is what I'm doing, or this is what I did. And this is,
Yeah.
hearing kind of the thoughts in my head spoken out loud by someone else. I think when we're less
Mm.
isolated, when we know that we're not alone and we're not the only one thinking that way, and we're not crazy, um, and that we don't have to think that way, that, maybe our brain is lying to us,
Right.
can give us a lot of permission to just not buy into that.
I love what you said about basically just doing the thing. Like you have to live the experience in order to actually understand the outcomes of that experience instead of catastrophizing it. And that's like and that's a parent thing too. Like when you first have, and this is something that I was not prepared for, but like when you first have a kid, you everything is something that can go wrong. Like you're afraid to go in the car to drive to the store because you're going to get into an accident and the
Right.
baby's going to die.
Right.
Or you're going to leave him in the car because you're not used to having a baby and then the baby's
Right.
going to die. Or, like I can't go to sleep because then the kid will sleep and then he'll
Yeah.
die. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's just like,
Yeah.
but yeah, so at a certain point, it's like, well, you have to actually live and do some of these things and get in the car and like maybe be careful or whatever to see that, hey, you know what, like it's not all going to be a catastrophe.
Yeah. And even, I can remember in certain situations, like when I was starting to write my book, there's so much fear that can go along with things like that. And it could be with any new thing,
Mm,
like, what if I do it and it's not good? What if I do it and nobody reads it? What if
right.
everyone
Yeah.
says they already knew all this information? So luckily,
Mm-hmm.
I took some online courses, and they had us do this exercise where, like, you write out like what all your fears are. And it was like, okay, no one buys the book. And then you write out,
Right.
okay, then what happens next?
Right.
And you just kind of like go through the whole exercise of like, okay, like, did you're still okay at the end of this, or what are all
Mm,
the things that are keeping you from doing the things that you want? And you write out all your fears. And then you write kind of like, okay, so now what are you going to do? How are you going to manage that? How are you going to get around it?
mm-hmm.
So just
Mm-hmm.
getting to the point where you're not letting that fear kind of
Yeah.
overrun your life. And that's definitely something I've had to put a lot of work in, because otherwise, and I definitely don't say this as someone who's had it all figured out. It's something I have to be reminded of very frequently, because otherwise you just get stuck
Mm,
in this like complete like paralysis mode, where it's like, I'm so
yeah.
afraid of what might happen, so I'll do nothing, in which
Right.
case I'll make no
Yeah.
progress, and my
Yeah.
dreams will definitely not come true. Um,
That's true. And at some point, your fear of not accomplishing the thing at all outweighs your fear of failing when you do accomplish the thing. Like, at least for me,
yes,
it was
yes.
more scary to be like, oh, I'm going to die not having done these things. Like, okay, so somebody doesn't, jive with the music that I put out or, whatever. At the end of the
Hmm.
day, I did it at least, as opposed to, being 85, sitting there feeble and having arthritis in my hands, never having done it. And that was more scary to me. So
yeah.
So then I started doing more of it.
Well, good.
But,
Good. I'm glad that fear won out.
yeah. I mean, you get to a pretty dark place though. Like, you want to, like, why can't you just be inspired to do it when you're like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. I'll just play the
Yeah.
guitar. And it had to
I'm
be
really
like an under
lucky because when
existential
I
threat.
started writing my book, I was like, I don't even care if anybody reads it. I'm just doing it because I want to do
Mm,
it. I'm doing it for me. And because
right.
I think if I had had the whole, like, I want everybody to like it while I was writing it, I probably never would have written it. So
Right.
I was like, this is
Yeah.
the book I want it to be, and I don't really care what anyone thinks. And then, of course, as soon as I finished it, I was like, oh crap, now I care what people think. I want people to
Yes.
read
Yeah.
it.
Which I think is a really wise way to approach it, though, because, yeah, you're right. You would never do it if you look all the way down this line of all the problems that you could potentially run into. It's like it's a lot easier to run through an obstacle course when it's foggy and all you can see is the one right in front of you.
Yes, yes.
So, yeah, because I felt the same thing. I mean, because I wrote a book that is not, coming out soon or anything, but I still have to do my final edits. But it's like, that was the thing. There was, of course, glimpses of that thought of like, what if no one reads it? But honestly, mostly it was like, what if I'm never going to be able to just sit down for long enough to write that many words? And so it's just like the process of sitting and writing every day. And then that became the success. If I sat down, I
Right.
wrote my 3,000 words, then I succeeded. And then at the end of it, oh, you have a book.
That's a lot of words. You wrote 3,000 words in one day?
Yeah,
Okay.
so
That's a
I
lot.
read, yeah, it felt like a lot. I
Like some
read
of my
Stephen
shorter
King's.
chapters were 3,000 words.
That's how it felt. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
like. So I read Stephen King's On Writing, and in it, did you read that book? Out of curiosity.
No.
It's I'm not like a Stephen King fan, but it's one of these books that just keeps getting. If you're a writer, people keep
I feel
handing
like
it
I've
to
heard
you,
of it.
and
I feel like I've
yeah,
seen people talk about it. I bought another book on
it's like
writing that I didn't read, but it's in my
okay.
room. It's on my desk.
Yeah. This is like it's like a memoir on the process of writing. And he goes through like some of his own personal stories and which I think is, so it's like semi autobiographical. And then
Hmm.
like he'll sprinkle in this, writing technique or some advice or whatever. And part of it was his process, which was if you're effectively the ethos is like, if you're a writer, then you write. That's your job. So you get up in the
Right.
morning, you write a certain number of words, and then you leave your space. You close the door, you write, and then you leave. So that's what I did. And I forget how many he did. It was like 2,000 or something like that a day. And I feel like the first couple of days it just started pouring out and I reached 3,000. I'm like, cool, that's what I'm going to do now, which was a silly decision to make early in the process. Because
No
some days it would be
pressure.
like 3 hours and some days it'll be like
Yeah.
7 hours. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
where are the words? Yeah.
What kind of book did you write?
I wrote one on my experience as a relief veterinarian. So it's basically it's half memoir, half instruction manual to kind of run a
Oh, okay.
small business, freelance type of thing. So
Nice.
yeah, same thing. It was like I just need to get it out
Yeah.
on the page.
Yeah.
And there was like, there's like scenes from a hotel where it's like they're pounding on the door at 2 PM when you're sleeping and you just like fly out of the bed, just like heart pounding. And now you can't go back to
Oh,
sleep.
jeez.
There's like, things like that. And then there's also like, and this is what's categorized as a business expense. so, so it seems like you made this big shift. I mean, because, the writing and all of that is a very different thing than clinical practice. But it's like
Yeah.
you have all these, this whole nother world of, consulting and writing and all this stuff that you're doing now. How did that happen? I mean, like what shift occurred and how quickly did that all shift?
So after I had well, while I was pregnant with my fourth child was when I really started working on the book to the extent that I could. I had a pregnancy scare where I thought something was wrong and everything
Yeah.
ended up being fine, but that was enough to put me off of it for a while. I was like, I just can't think of, I can't
I see.
compartmentalize that enough. But I was working on and off, and then after I had um, my last baby, I really kind of got serious about it, and I was like, I need to make this happen. And I would say after with my two youngest kids, that was where I really started thinking a lot about wanting to not be in clinical practice all the time. Just
Mm,
even apart from the writing, I just started thinking, is there something else that I could do? Like, and still use my
yeah.
degree and my training and my knowledge, but be home more because I was
Yeah.
getting sick of having to call out. It was happening a lot, and I was because my kids were sick. I was feeling a lot of
Yeah.
guilt about that, and I was just very overwhelmed. And I just wanted to try something else out. And but for the longest time, I'd say I wish I could work from home, but I can't because I'm a vet. You know, vets don't work from
Right.
home. People would laugh. We'd be like, "What are you
Right.
going to do? Bring the dog to your house?" And I'd be like,
Right.
um, and I put a couple feelers out to a couple people, but like nothing ever came of it. And then when I was like back at work after my fourth baby was born, I took a course. Um, I don't know if you know Melanie Barham.
Mm-mm.
She's
No.
now the CEO of Vet Stay Go Diversify, if you've heard of that
Okay.
company.
Mm-mm.
But before that she's a vet in Canada, and before that she had her own company called the DVM Project.
Okay.
Um, and she did a course um, with it was like a coaching course hybrid called Ready for Change. It was with Melanie Barham and Colleen Best, two Canadian vets. And it was for
Okay.
veterinarians who were kind of trying to figure out if they needed to make a change and try to determine if it was a career change or if they just needed to think differently about their current job, just kind of
Right.
going through what are my values, what are my strengths, what are my goals, and
Yeah.
really kind of
Yeah.
analyzing that. And I didn't have an absolute clear idea of what I wanted to do at the end of that, but I had a lot more encouragement to really make my book a priority and to kind of
Okay.
see what came from that. And so I think that just kind of shifted my mindset. And that was when I started doing relief also. It just kind of
Okay.
allowed me to make that mind shift to say, like, okay, well, is it going to be the book or is it going to be maybe the book and other
Right.
stuff too?
It probably helped clarify like goals and values and actually primarily values. Like what is
Yeah,
important to you in life? Like who am I? Like what is this job serving?
right.
And has it served its purpose, in
Right.
a way?
Well, it was funny because, when my values, like the idea of family just kept coming up, like being a mom, my
Right.
family. And I'm like, okay,
Right.
well, I'm a vet, so I can't make money from that. That can't be my
Yeah.
job because I'm a vet. So it didn't really click for a while. And I remember saying things like, well, I'm writing a book, but that's not my job. I'm not going to make money from that. But it wasn't
Yeah.
until I really had that drive to want to find something to potentially replace being in the clinic all the time. I thought, okay, well, I'm writing. People are telling me that I'm good at that. How can I try to, I hate to say monetize it, but I'm like, obviously I have to get paid if I'm
Right.
gonna
Right.
leave my other job behind. So how can I do that?
Hmm.
So I started, I had already had my blog and I was doing that. So I had some things to show people. So I started reaching out to some of the veterinary publications um, and just saying, do you have any opportunities for paid writing? And at first I got some unpaid opportunities
Right.
and then didn't hear back from some of the other companies for a long time or ever. Um,
Yeah.
so that's, kind of how it goes. But then, just kind of like a chance post that I happened to see in one of the DVM mom Facebook groups connected me with someone who ended up um, was actually looking for a veterinarian who could do some content, educational content writing for pet
Mm,
owners. And so I jumped on that and sent her the stuff that I had, and that led to um, kind of a contract writing opportunity that I had
yeah.
for the past year and a half. It's just ended, but um,
Cool.
that, and then the American Animal Hospital Association reached out to me, and they're like, "Hey, we've seen some of your stuff. Would you like to write for us?" And so then I was able to like
Right.
piece together enough stuff and made the scary decision to walk away from practice, at least
Yeah.
temporarily, um,
Wow.
and work only from home. And
That's so cool.
just as someone who had
Yeah.
never done it, it was very freeing. I'm like, wait, my kids
Mm-hmm.
are home from school and I'm here. I
Yeah.
need to change my plans last minute because my kid is sick or because I'm taking my daughter on a college tour. I'm like, that's okay, because as long as I turn in the work, no one's really paying attention to when I'm doing it. And sometimes I'm doing it at 10 o'clock at night, but
Right.
that's okay.
Right.
And it's really
Yes.
hard to do that. I don't want to make it sound like, well, you just get a remote job and it'll be fine, because there are a lot of people who want to do that and it's really hard. And like,
Yes.
I am probably not going to continue to be 100% remote, because a lot of the stuff is like contract work and it ends, you know?
Yeah, and but what you're and what you're talking about is sort of this unseen work that is done on the front end and during, that I feel like gets missed. Like if you're just looking at the LinkedIn posts and the Instagram or whatever, if you're just looking at that, you don't see, the iceberg under the surface, all of these emails and calls and
Mm-hmm.
networking events and people that you met along the way, that nothing came of any of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
It's true.
yeah.
It's
And
true.
then it's a little bit like Outliers, where it's like you put in, it is a combination of a ton of work and then
Mm-hmm.
also the luck that allows you to then do the thing, right?
Right.
Like in this
And
way, if you had not done the work, you would have never seen that chance post and no one would have reached out to you, but
right.
the work in and of itself wasn't enough.
Right. And even the two, like the opportunity that was writing for a pet insurance company, and then like AHA,
Mm,
like neither of those were like, we're looking for someone to write this many articles a month and here's the position and here's exactly how
right.
it's going to be. It was
Right.
just kind of like
Yeah.
something that, I had to be very vocal about, hey, this is, what I would like it to be, and can it be more,
Yeah.
and can you give me more, and can I do
Right.
this, and do you need help with this? And it wasn't something that was just waiting for someone to fill it. It was like, oh, well, yes, like now that we've seen you do this, or now that we know that that's what you
Right.
would like to do, yes, that would be great. So it very
Yeah.
much kind of was created. Um, so
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not enough
Sometimes if,
always to just kind of look for a job posting. You know what I mean? Because it may
right.
not
Exactly.
may not exist.
Yeah. If you're trying to do something different, sometimes you have to create that thing yourself. Like it's
Right.
different because it may not exist, you know?
Right. Right. Right.
Or, yeah. Yeah. That's wise. And I also look at opportunity like, it's not going to fit exactly the thing that you have in your mind as the final goal. But if it
Yeah.
moves kind of in that direction, if it is on the same trajectory, if it is in line with a certain number of values,
Yeah.
you never know where it's going to go. So like just take advantage of those opportunities, because then they
Yeah,
lead to
for
another
sure.
one, to another one, et cetera.
Yeah, I don't even know what the next couple of years are going to look like for me, because again, I'm in
Right.
another state of change, and I'm hoping to be able to do more stuff on my own, just related to parenting and veterinary medicine, trying to help move the needle on parental leave, within our
Mm-hmm.
industry, which I think just in general is, not where it needs to be. Um,
Sure.
so I'm hoping to be able to do some more work there, but I will almost definitely be doing, some clinical stuff along the way, and continuing to do some writing, and just kind of a little bit all over the place here, because
That's great.
that's how it'll work out.
It's
But
really it's cool to kind of be in the, I don't know, middle, I guess, of a career and have it feel like it's an entirely new experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's scary as well. But that also is
terrifying.
One of those things like, well, what else are we doing? Yeah.
It's terrifying because it's like, what if, is this going to work? Am I going to bring in enough money? Are we going to have enough security? Are people going to like what I create? Right. It's terrifying,
Yeah, especially with kids, right? Like if it was just you in the cabin in the mountains, then the stakes are lower.
Right. Yeah.
But you have like a whole family to think about. Yeah, it makes it hard. It makes it hard to take those risks. So good for you for doing them.
Oh, thank you.
One thing that I've realized with both veterinarians and parents, it's like there's a commonality in that veterinarians basically only talk about vet med, and like parents basically only talk about being parents. So like, how do you find the balance? Like, do you have other things as well that you're like, oh yeah, this is how I'm a human being outside of those things?
They exist. Don't always get to pursue them very much in the current sort of season of life that I'm in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like really hard to create the balance. It's like whenever I'm around all my veterinary friends and it's like that's all we're talking about, I just start going crazy. Like my skin starts to crawl. And like we are human beings outside of this as well. So, and then now that I'm a parent, I find that like the things outside of it, it's like we have friends, but then they're also parents. And so it's like, oh yeah, how many bottles did he have last night? I'm like, I can't. I can't do it.
I don't know. I think I think it's good to remember that and have perspective, but I think it's also okay to realize that there are some like seasons of life that are just so like all consuming that it's okay if you don't have room to talk about much else, or you're just too exhausted, if it occupies almost all of your thought. I mean, I think it's good to like consciously move away from that some of the time, but also not feel bad about it if it's not what it used to be, because it won't always be like that. And I say that to myself just as much as to everybody else.
Right.
Like I won't always have two little terrorist toddler boys running around my house, like trying to like destroy my last little bit of sanity. Like it won't always be like that. Someday we'll be able to go to the movies and we'll be able to bring them with us. And we'll just sit there for 2 hours and relax.
Exactly.
That is not today.
Not today. That's actually a really good point. It's like having surveillance so that you can make changes as appropriate, so you don't get stuck, but also having grace that's like, hey, you know what? It's an appropriate response to the time of life that you're in.
Yes.
I think it's really wise. All right.
Yes.
I'll let myself do it more. You're right. You're right.
It's okay if you don't have anything else to talk about. Everybody knows you just had a baby.
Right. Yeah. It's not like, what am I going to do? Be like, running a photography lab in my basement?
Yeah. No. Nobody expects you to have this like, I mean, it sounds like you're doing a ton of things anyway. You wrote a book, you have a podcast, you do Relief. I mean.
Yes. And I'm writing music and all this stuff, but it is out of that.
That can be enough.
Yes. Yeah, you're right. It can be. And it's like somehow I have to have like equal opportunity for all of these topics in conversation. It's like that's crazy. I mean, You're right. Like maybe I don't have to shove all of it in right now. Maybe I can, take a videography course or a history of film course when I'm 50. Just like give myself the grace now to say, hey, this is an experience, live through it, try to pay attention to it. Don't try to like, even it out with other things just for the sake of evening it out with other things.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if it's not like fitting in your life and bringing you joy, then.
Right. Yeah. It's all additive as opposed to maybe subtractive. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I'll definitely see welcome. Now I'm going to change my approach just based off of this conversation. Yeah. This is what's so great about these conversations.
Yeah. And then as soon as you think you have it all figured out, and then something else will change.
Man, isn't that?
You'll have to figure it out again.
I call it troubleshooting without learning. That's what parenthood has been to me, is troubleshooting without learning. It's like constantly, what is wrong now? How do we fix it? This will not be applicable tomorrow.
Well, it's like, yeah, it's like there's no manual and there's like endless updates and endless bugs.
Yes,
and
exactly.
Nobody knows what they are or how to fix them.
Yes. Right. But everyone wants to tell you about how they did it.
Everybody knows why you're not doing a good enough job.
Yes, exactly.
No, I shouldn't say. I mean, I have so many like kind and gracious, helpful people in my life. I mean, I think sometimes the voices of the critics are so much louder, but
right.
There really aren't that many of them.
With my own parents, when they're offering input, and same with Lindsay's parents, it's like, these are things that are not applicable anymore. Or, like my mom was like, yeah, just co-sleep, like no big deal. I'm like, it says not to, and if the baby dies, I'll go to jail. Like, I'm not. When we were kids, the recommendation was to put us on our bellies in the crib. Just like, well, lay him down, he'll be fine.
Yeah. It's like we've learned a lot, but I mean, I will just say I wake up with 2 boys in my bed every single day, and they're not babies anymore. So like I was much more nervous about co-sleeping with babies. But having said that, there are plenty of people that do it and find ways to do it as safely as possible. So I talk about it in my book, and I hope I accomplished it. Like, I try so hard to just be like just present the information and kind of be kind of neutral about it, and say like, okay, American Academy of Pediatricians recommends against it.
Right.
But I know, like from my own personal experience, there are some babies who just will not sleep unless they can feel you there. So if it's the only way you can make it work, there are ways to make it safer.
Yes. I think that's actually where it becomes problematic, is that because it's such a taboo thing. Like, there's so many things you're not supposed to do as a parent that are actually things that save your sanity. And then you're like, I can't talk about them, so I don't know how to necessarily make them safer or more appropriate.
Right. Because you're afraid if you bring it up, you're just going to get judged.
Exactly. Yes.
I would just say, like, you're doing the best that you can. If you feel like you're not doing a good job, if you're stressed all the time, if you feel like it's really hard, it's because you're a really good parent.
Yeah, I hear that a lot, and I definitely echo it for any parents that feel like that. They're just stressed out about everything, and whatever. It's like, okay, yeah, that's normal, and it means that you're a good parent.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well, gosh, thank you for. I mean, I really appreciate you coming on and spending the time and talking to me.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Of course,
it was great. It's a little bit different from some of the other things you might hear on veterinary podcasts, but
yeah, that's the goal.
We get to be humans too.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
We get to talk about all the parts of our life.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you. Congratulations on your baby boy and your new book and all the stuff you have going on.
Yeah, you too. Do you know when it'll be released, your book?
Yes, November 27th.
Oh, so you have a date.
Oh yeah. It's available for pre-order now.
Wow.
Yeah, it's Very on cool. Amazon. It's on Barnes and Noble.
That's exciting.
It's on the publisher website. I can send that to you. But yeah, it's available for pre-order now, and it's going to ship on November 27th.
That's so cool. Well, congratulations. Yeah. That's a big step. Wow.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited.
There is this, I did see on your LinkedIn, you had this post about going into Barnes and Noble and being like, I don't know if it'll be on a shelf and all that. And it reminded me of,
I don't think they're going to carry my book in person, but it was my little dream.
So it reminded me of a Mitch Hedberg bit, which is, his he was saying like, oh, this comedy album, like it's not available. It's like, if I want it to be available in stores, like I have to bring in a copy and leave it there. It's like, excuse me, sir, you forgot your album. It's like, no, that is for sale.
That is a good idea, except
yeah.
That's why I just put it there in that picture. I'm like, pets and parenting are right, or pets and pregnancy. I don't remember what it was. Pets, pregnancy, and parenting were all right next to each other. And I'm like, this is meant to be. My book can be right there in the
Exactly.
middle.
Just leave a copy. Create a
Yeah.
buzz.
Yeah.
You know?
You can sign it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Well, thanks again.